Okay. Well, it is 1 o'clock here in the Eastern Time Zone, so perhaps we can get started. So first of all, hello everyone, and excuse me, welcome to this special CHRA online town hall event. My name is Jeff Morrison. I'm the Executive Director of CHRA. Bonjour tout le monde. Mon nom c'est Jeff Morrison. Je suis le directeur exécutif de la CHRA. And in case I do forget to say this at the end of the conference, I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, Joyeux Fête à vous tous. So, as you all know, roughly 2 weeks ago, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Minister responsible for Housing, Jean-Yves Duclos, unveiled the long-awaited National Housing Strategy. Now, this was a document that CHRA and our members have advocated for many years to achieve, and over the past 2 years, CHRA has worked in very close contact with the federal government to develop its content. I don't think it's any coincidence that the strategy's focus was really on shoring up and strengthening the social and affordable housing sector in Canada. As CHRA and our national partners have advocated for many years, this was absolutely necessary, and it was clearly the right thing to do. Compte tenu de la complexité et de sa nature à long terme, il est naturel qu'il y a beaucoup de questions sur la stratégie, mais aussi beaucoup de travail à faire. Clairement, la section autochtone demeure la plus grande partie des affaires inachevées et nous travaillons avec les affaires autochtones et de la SCHL pour continuer à défendre les besoins des fournisseurs de logements d'Autochtones, en particulier ceux en milieu urbain et rural. Mais compte tenu des annonces contenues dans la stratégie, il est important que les membres de la CHRA soient tenus au courant des nouvelles politiques et de nouveaux programmes à venir, et ce que ces nouveaux programmes signifient pour les fournisseurs de logements du Canada. L'événement aujourd'hui est une étape dans ce processus. Et donc, nous sommes très heureux d'avoir deux officiels qui étaient instrumentaux dans le développement de la stratégie avec nous aujourd'hui. Today, we're very pleased to be joined by two officials from CMHC who were instrumental in the strategy's design and content. Our two presenters from CMHC are Michel Tremblay, who is the Senior Vice President, Policy, Research and Public Affairs, and Debbie Stewart, who is the Director, Housing Needs. Now, Michel and Debbie led much of the internal and external development work for CMHC on the strategy. I know personally that Michel, Debbie, and their teams have put in countless hours over the past 2 years, particularly over the past few months, to assemble this strategy. And on behalf of CHRA, I want to publicly recognize you for those efforts. Of course, there does remain a great deal of work to be done, but there's no question that we've made significant strides in a relatively short period of time. Now, avant de passer le plancher virtuel à Debbie et Michel, je dois donner quelques instructions sur cette technique webinaire. Le webinaire aujourd'hui est en temps réel. Vous devriez maintenant être en mesure de voir un écran de titre de la présentation et être capable de m'entendre via les haute-paroles de votre ordinateur, les écouteurs ou via votre téléphone. Now, you are all currently, everyone on the line other than the presenters, are all muted, and we do this to minimize the background noise. After Debbie and Michel's presentation, I will ask Debbie and Michel a number of questions that have been sent in advance by our members. However, if you wish to ask questions, please put the question in either official language into the question dialog box on the webinar control panel at any time during the presentation. We'll get to as many of those questions as we can in the time that we have. However, if we run out of time before all questions are answered, and I suspect that may be the case, we will provide those questions to CMHC in writing with a request that they try and provide us with written responses, which of course we'll share with all of you. And also note that your comments and your questions are just as equally important for CHRA, as they'll provide us with valuable feedback on any concerns that our members have with the strategy. And I should add, of course, please do not hesitate to share any concerns or comments with me at any time. Lastly, this event is being recorded, and it will be made available if you wish to rewatch or have someone else watch. Et dernièrement, si vous avez des problèmes avec la technologie, s'il vous plaît, contactez Mark Hughes à notre bureau. Vous pouvez contacter Marc via la boîte de messages sur votre écran. Assurez que vous sélectez Marc comme le récipient ou téléphonez Marc à 603-594-3007-22. So with that, that's my boring but yet necessary introduction. So with that, I'm now pleased to pass the virtual floor over to Michel and Debbie. And Michel and Debbie, again, thank you for being here today, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Jeff. Merci beaucoup, Jeff. And thank you for the invitation to attend this webinar. C'est un plaisir pour Debbie et moi de s'adresser aux membres de votre association. We both think that CHRA has been a great partner on our journey towards the launch of the National Housing Strategy, and we look forward to a continued great working relationship. As you mentioned, the NHS was built through extensive consultations over a period of close to 2 years, and your members should feel proud of your contributions. Nous allons passer à travers la présentation assez rapidement pour ensuite, comme tu l'as mentionné, tenter de répondre à vos questions. Please note that we may not be able to answer all of your questions today because we're still in the final process of obtaining our financial authorities, but we will attempt to answer as many as we can today. And I can't remember if I have control of these slides, but if I do, I'm going to attempt to go to the next slide, and hopefully it works. And it does. I don't think I have to read to your members the vision. This audience is quite familiar with it, but you see it here on the screen. And I also, as Jeff mentioned, I'm sure I don't have to mention, or it comes as no surprise, certainly to the membership, that the focus of the National Housing Strategy will be meeting the needs of the most vulnerable populations in Canada. Ces populations incluront, entre autres, les aînés, les autochtones, les survivants de situations de violence familiale, les personnes handicapées, les réfugiés, les anciens combattants et les sans-abri. The NHS will create a new generation of housing in Canada, promoting diverse communities and building housing that is sustainable, accessible, mixed income and mixed use, and located close to transit, work, and public services. The next slide talks about the strategy keeping people, communities, and partnerships at the forefront of all the initiatives and policies are designed to respect these principles. For people, it recognizes that every Canadian deserves a safe home that they can afford, with, as I mentioned, a focus on people who are facing the greatest challenges and needs. The strategy also recognizes that housing is very much a local context, as are communities. And investment can work together with other investments to create stronger communities. Elle se fonde sur le partenariat entre le gouvernement fédéral, les provinces, les territoires, les municipalités, le secteur social, le secteur privé, ainsi que sur les personnes qui ont déjà été dans le besoin en matière de logement. We also recognize that long-term solutions and strategies to address the needs of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nation peoples must be co-developed with the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nation governments, as well as their organizations. I don't have to tell you guys that the federal government is back in housing. We have fielded a lot of questions on what the $40 billion is and is not. Debbie présentera bientôt les initiatives les plus importantes, mais j'aimerais tenter de démystifier le montant de 40 milliards de dollars. First, what it does and does not include. It includes both federal loans and contributions, new and existing, as well as requirements for provinces and territories cost matching. It does not include additional investments which will come from the National Housing Co-Investment Fund. And the breakdown is as follows. Des nouveaux prêts et contributions fédérales de 23,9 milliards de dollars. Recently announced programs such as the Rental Construction Financing Initiative, and the Innovation Fund, which totaled $2.7 billion, existing funding under operating agreements of $9.8 billion, which total of federal investments of $36.4 billion. As well, there's a requirements for PT to cost match $7.4 billion, which brings the total to $43 billion. En plus de ces investissements considérables, un cadre de responsabilisation robuste sera mis en place pour la stratégie nationale sur le logement. La réussite de la stratégie sera mesurée en fonction de l'atteinte des résultats sur une période de 10 ans. Nous rendrons publics les objectifs et les cibles à atteindre. A comprehensive evaluation of NHS programs with significant input from external sources will be conducted every 3 years to assess program performance. A report will also be tabled in Parliament. In addition to providing accountability, these evaluations will determine whether the direction and the initiatives of the National Housing Strategy should be adjusted in order to meet the stated outcomes. Our goal is to work in partnership with others and to stretch every dollar to make sure it has the absolute maximum impact for as many Canadians as possible. The next slide, which is difficult to see on my screen anyway, tries to put the scale of investments in perspective, showing what the federal investment would have been had it not been for the National Housing Strategy and what it is with the National Housing Strategy. As you know, the federal housing investment in housing would have declined significantly over the next 10 years, and the National Housing Strategy not only stops this decline, but actually increases it significantly. Slide 6, or the next slide, speaks to the goals of the National Housing Strategy. Overall, it aims to lift 530,000 families and individuals out of housing need. The new Canada Housing Benefit that will help with rent affordability is a key tool in achieving this goal. The NHS also aims to reduce chronic homelessness by 50%. This will be supported by an investment in municipalities so that communities can lead the fight against homelessness. Il est important de souligner que la stratégie aura particulièrement pour objectif d'améliorer notre offre de logement communautaire et de logement locatif abordable. Elle préservera l'abordabilité, améliorera les conditions de logement pour 385 familles et personnes seules qui habitent dans les logements communautaires pour lesquels les aides financières n'étaient pas toujours garanties. It will also build new affordable rental and community housing with a plan to support construction of 100,000 new units over the 10-year period. And it will repair 300,000 affordable rental and community housing units. The new National Housing Co-Investment Fund will be a key tool to support construction and repair of affordable housing. Je cède maintenant la parole à Debbie.
Merci, Michel. So I'm going to spend some time before we go to questions and answers to go through each of the key elements of the National Housing Strategy and give you a little bit of detail on that. Alors, comme a mentionné Michel, je vais passer à travers chaque initiative pour vous donner un peu plus de détails. So I'm going to start with the rights-based framework for housing because it's a real foundational piece of the National Housing Strategy and something that we're quite excited about. The rights-based framework really does support the entire vision of the National Housing Strategy. Michel talked a little bit about that vision, but it's really about ensuring that Canadians have access to housing that is safe, affordable, meets their needs. The rights-based framework really is about taking additional steps and some pretty big steps to progressively implement the right to housing. In particular, a couple things I want to highlight is that we're going to be consulting on new legislation that's going to support the right to housing. And that's also going to require future governments to have a national housing strategy in place and to report on its results. Another piece in terms of accountability and really supporting that rights-based framework is the introduction of a new housing advocate. And that housing advocate is going to make use of new disaggregated data that we're going to produce through surveys, which I'll mention soon. And it's going to engage in consultations and dialogue on systemic issues and barriers facing Canadians of all walks of life in accessing that safe and affordable housing. De plus, un nouveau défenseur de logement se penchera sur les enjeux et les défis auxquels font face les Canadiens de différents milieux et horizons. I went backwards. Thank you. Okay, so tied to the rights-based approach to housing, we at CMHC are particularly proud of the robust gender-based analysis that was undertaken to support the National Housing Strategy. For those of you not familiar with it, the GBA Plus is a tool to assess how diverse groups of women, men, and gender diverse people may experience new policies, programs, and initiatives. It takes into account things like race, ethnicity, religion, age, mental or physical disability as well. One of the key things that we found in that gender-based analysis, and some of it is included in the vision document that was shared publicly on the launch November 22nd, but some of what we saw is that women in particular face unique barriers to housing due to things like lower income or caregiver responsibilities, sometimes dependence on a partner for income. And the other thing that we saw was that women who are members of Canada's vulnerable populations have unique experiences of housing need and homelessness. And so that's why you would have seen in the vision document a commitment for the National Housing Strategy, in the National Housing Strategy, that at least 25% of the investments will support projects that specifically target the unique needs of women and girls. And that includes things like supportive housing, shelters, second stage homes for women and girls who are fleeing situation of violence, for example. Okay, so another exciting new tool that we're adding to the toolbox is the new Canada Housing Benefit. I want to be very clear on this one though. The benefit hasn't yet been designed. That work's going to happen next year and probably into 2019, and it's going to happen in partnership with provinces and territories because the benefit will be delivered by the provinces and territories. What we're thinking, what this will look like, is that there will be some common parameters that will apply across the country, but there's also opportunity for the benefit to be modified and in order to really meet the particular needs of each province and territory, and most importantly, to ensure that it's going to work well in that context so that it meshes and aligns well with existing programs, social supports, etc. So this new tool, the Canada Housing Benefit, is going to roll out or come into effect in 2020. The reason it's coming into effect in 2020 is primarily because, and you've likely heard this in the media and elsewhere, but this is the case. We really want to get it right. It's a fairly complex piece of work. We have to make sure that it works well in each province, and we have to consider really how it's going to, as I said before, how it's going to fit in with social benefit systems and that type of thing. In the meantime, the focus is going to be on building and repairing social and affordable housing through the National Housing Co-Investment Fund. And I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. Alors, juste rapidement en français. Une nouvelle allocation canadienne d'aide au logement sera lancée en 2020 pour fournir une aide à l'abordabilité directement aux familles et aux personnes éprouvant des besoins en matière de logement. Cet argent sera versé directement aux ménages pour compenser le coût de loyer des familles qui consacrent beaucoup trop de leurs revenus au loyer. L'allocation se débutera en 2020. Entre-temps, on va travailler avec chaque province et territoire pour développer le nouvel programme. So a central feature of the National Housing Strategy is a $15.9 billion National Housing Co-Investment Fund. The National Housing Co-Investment Fund is going to be delivered by CMHC. The objective of the fund is to build new affordable housing and to repair existing affordable and community housing. So when we say affordable housing, we really mean this in the broadest sense. Everything from shelters to supportive housing, social housing, affordable rental, and affordable homeownership. And we're going to do this by offering a combination of capital contributions, so that's effectively grants, similar to grants, and the grants will be used to offset development or construction costs, as well as low interest loans as an affordable financing option. So just to give you a sense, in total the fund consists of $4.7 billion in financial contributions and $11.2 billion in loans. For new developments, the fund will prioritize mixed-use, mixed-income housing developments, and these developments, we're really looking for them to be well located in communities, So that means things like close to transit or schools, job supports, the things that people really need to thrive. There are also going to be minimum requirements related to these areas that projects will have to meet to be considered for funding. The fund is also a key means to repair and renew existing social housing. We expect to repair about 240,000 units. Another key feature is it's called the co-investment fund because it is really about partnership and joint investments. So we're going to work hard to facilitate having all the right partners at the table to build the best affordable housing and hopefully do it faster. And then finally, another exciting opportunity about the National Housing Strategy is that there's an opportunity to stack and layer these different tools to meet the unique needs of providers. So the co-investment fund can be used with federal lands. For example, it can be used with other tools as well. Okay, so I think you'll agree that while it's exciting that we have tools to build new social and affordable housing and to repair it, in the consultations and especially over the past year, we heard loud and clear that we really need to support the existing stock of social housing so it's not lost and can support future generations. So this is a key commitment in the National Housing Strategy, is to continue to invest in existing social housing. And this is going to happen in two ways. First, the federal government will provide $4.3 billion to provinces and territories over the next 10 years of the strategy. Unlike the social housing agreements that are in place today, there will be more requirements tied to this funding. Let me give you a sense of that. So first, there's a requirement that provinces and territories also invest in the social housing. There's a requirement that there's no net loss of social housing units in the province. And in fact, the goal is actually to see an expansion of social housing. So the second way that we're supporting social housing with regards to a new federal program to support the stock of social housing that is still administered by CMHC. So first, we're going to extend all expiring subsidies until 2020. And that's going to give us some time to consult with our housing providers on a new social housing program and agreements. And that new program will come into effect in 2020. A technical resource center is going to be available to support housing providers, whether it's provincially or federally administered. It's really just a resource for social housing providers. Le gouvernement fédéral a résolu à veiller à ce que le parc de logements sociaux du Canada demeure abordable et en bon état pendant de nombreuses années. C'est la raison pour laquelle la stratégie nationale sur le logement comprend des investissements considérables pour appuyer le logement communautaire. L'objectif est de préserver le nombre total de logements communautaires au Canada et d'en accroître le nombre. La plupart des investissements sera versés aux provinces et territoires. Pour le parc de logement fédéral, on va consulter avec le fournisseur de logement sur la conception d'un nouveau programme qui sera lancé en 2020. Okay, so this next slide really just shows how much of the National Housing Strategy investment is in partnership with provinces and territories. Provinces and territories are a key partner in this strategy, and the reason for that is multifold, but one thing is that we want to ensure that all regions achieve better housing outcomes, and so there's funding that flows, a lot of funding that flows to provinces and territories. So la stratégie investira dans les provinces et territoires afin que toutes les régions obtiennent de meilleurs résultats en matière de logement. En tout, la stratégie nationale sur le logement investira des fonds fédéraux de environ 20 milliards de dollars dans le logement pour les provinces et territoires. So in addition to the pieces I've just talked about, so the social housing investments and the new Canada housing benefit that the provinces and territories are going to deliver, there is also investments that will support provincial and territorial priorities. And they can be used in a wide range of different ways by the provinces and territories to meet the more unique or distinct needs within that region. So conceptually, this is similar to the current investment in affordable housing that's in place today for those of you who are familiar with that program. And of course, there's also additional funding for the 3 territories who are facing more severe housing challenges and overall higher housing costs. So in addition to the new housing programs, the National Housing Strategy also emphasizes enhanced research and data collection. This will help us better understand Canada's housing markets, and it's going to fill data gaps and promote economic stability generally. There will be a full suite of new initiatives that will be communicated in the new year related to this research investment. I can give a little bit of a preview and point to some of the things that it includes. So housing demonstration projects that are really going to showcase what's possible and practical in housing. Solution labs that are going to be put in place to support housing providers and housing stakeholders, those who are active in the sector, to really work through challenges and barriers and develop solutions that will lead to better outcomes. There's going to be support for a new academic research network. There's going to be awards and scholarships, and all of that is to support more interest in housing research. As well, there's funding for research or knowledge sharing events in the housing sector more broadly to really ensure that that knowledge is being disseminated and to support broad and diverse perspectives in our housing research. And a piece that CMHC is directly involved in and quite pleased about is that we're working with Statistics Canada to develop 2 new surveys, so we'll have a better picture of housing in Canada. So there's one survey that really focuses on buildings, the built environment, and another survey that's going to focus on households so we can understand the household conditions. Alors, la prochaine étape. Au cours des prochains mois, les initiatives faisant partie de la stratégie seront élaborées et finalisées et elles devraient pouvoir être lancées à partir du 1er avril 2018. We're also putting in place a comprehensive, as Michel mentioned, a comprehensive measurement and reporting framework, including with the provinces and territories. And the outcomes, indicators, targets, and results of all that will be communicated publicly. So thank you very much for listening through our presentation. We're happy to receive your questions.
Great. Well, thank you, Debbie and Michel. Very much appreciate that. Just a reminder for anyone on the call, if you do have any questions or comments, please feel free to type those in the comment board or the comment section of the panel, which should be to the right of your screen. Donc, si vous avez des questions, des commentaires, s'il vous plaît, les écrits dans le panel sur votre écran. Before we get to any written questions, though, I did have a number of questions that were provided to us by members in advance of the event. So I'd just like to get to some of these, and then we'll take any additional questions in the time we have left. Some of these questions, I think, Debbie and Michel, you answered. So just as a way of speeding things up, I may just ask you to reconfirm some of these points. So la première question était, est-ce qu'il y a des programmes spécifiquement pour les aînés dans la stratégie? Is there anything in the strategy specifically for seniors housing? And someone asked, especially with respect to the ability to age at home.
So I guess the specific to the seniors, I guess what we would say to that, Jeff, is that a number of the programs the seniors are a vulnerable population in a lot of instances, and they will be prioritized. So, for example, the National Co-Investment Fund has a target, as you would have seen in the presentation, of 12,000 new affordable units specifically for seniors. The Canada Housing Benefit will also benefit seniors in the cases where they have affordability challenges and they're renting. Same thing with the 2 community housing initiatives. Obviously, by maintaining and repairing these units and the subsidies associated with it, it will help seniors who are living in these units. Specific to the being able to age at home, I think Health Canada actually has a program or developing a program for home care, which will help seniors who decide to stay at home as a way to as a decision that they make personally.
Right. Thank you. Someone's asked if there are, if you could kind of just talk for a few moments about opportunities in the strategy for the private sector. If you could probably sort of comment on that.
Absolutely, Jeff. So in the National Housing Co-Investment Fund, the the fund will be eligible for the private sector, the not-for-profit sector, etc. So there's an opportunity there, provided, of course, that the mandatory requirements, so the minimum requirements around affordability and all the other good social outcomes that we want to get from that are being respected. And as you may know, CMHC has also introduced recently a new lending program. It's on the ground now, and that's the Rental Construction Financing Initiative, and the private sector is able to participate in that. I guess the final thing I would say is for the co-investment fund, we really are trying to encourage partnerships, so there is opportunity for a whole range of partnerships to be formed that could include the private sector as well.
Okay, thank you. My next two questions I think you've addressed, but again I'll ask for the sake of confirmation. I believe in your presentation you stated that models that are more in the affordable home ownership sector, models such as, for example, Trillium Housing or Habitat for Humanity, would these type of home ownership type programs or organizations be eligible for the capital grants and loans under the strategy?
Yes, they would be, Jeff. That's correct. Debbie did mention that. That would be under the National Co-Investment Fund, Housing Co-Investment Fund.
Okay. And
so
the other thing
shelter to home ownership.
Thank you. And I think the other question you did answer was whether the strategy will allow for stacking, whereby a provider could apply and get funding under more than one program. I believe you said yes, that stacking will be allowed.
Yes. Definitely. It's the only way we think that we can meet the unique needs across this country.
Okay. We had a question from one of our urban Indigenous providers, which is that, understanding that the Indigenous component is still being developed, but in the meantime, are existing urban Indigenous providers eligible for the programs that have already been announced in the strategy, or will they have to kind of wait until that Indigenous component is finalized?
So thank you for the question, Jeff. No, so yes, they will be eligible for the initiatives under the National Co-Investment Fund, and also under the Federal Community Initiative Fund. So the answer to that is yes, and they're actually, again, as we mentioned, they are a priority group in the National Housing Strategy.
Je vous demande une question en français, c'est concernant les fonds pour la recherche. Comme vous avez dit, un des objectifs de ces investissements est de renforcer la capacité de partenariat et de recherche sur le logement à l'extérieur du secteur public. Je crois que peut-être vous avez déjà répondu à ça, mais êtes-vous en mesure de préciser de quelle manière ou par quel mécanisme le SCHL compte atteindre cet objectif?
Oui, certainement. Debbie l'a touché un peu. Donc, il va y avoir comme elle a mentionné, des laboratoires d'innovation, des démonstrations. Il y aura également des programmes de bourse, des programmes de réseau universitaire pour encourager la recherche universitaire et collégiale. Il y aura également des réseaux pour transférer et partager l'information. Donc, on veut vraiment maximiser la recherche au Canada au niveau du logement, que ça ne soit pas uniquement l'affaire de la CHL. Donc, on veut encourager de faire des partenariats encore sur la recherche en matière de logement.
Merci. Another question that came to us, is there funding available in any of the envelopes for the construction of new or for demolition and rebuild of existing homelessness shelters?
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. So for the co-investment fund, we're really looking at that as covering a broad spectrum of housing, including homeless shelters.
Okay, thank you. This next question is a bit of a two-parter. The strategy identified the Housing Co-Investment Fund as a large component, and of course where much of the new money is, but at this point a bit vague on details. The part A to this question is, could you explain how you see this working and perhaps provide some examples of initiatives that it might assist? And the sort of part B is that while the fund doesn't formally require provincial or territorial matching funds, it's set up as a partnership fund. And the question is there any minimal contributions? Someone's provided the example that if a municipality were to waive development charges, would that be a sufficient minimal contribution?
Okay, so in terms of how it's working, how it would work, just really quickly. So we see this as being application-based, where there's a call to action and a single application process, and then there will be a review in terms of whether or not the mandatory requirements around affordability, because this is really about affordable housing, and also the environment and other kind of key considerations are being met. So in terms of the cost matching, so I said that it is a co-investment fund, so it is about partnership, but your member's quite right. Like we are looking at thinking quite broadly around what a contribution could be. It may not be simply waiving a development charge. Those details will come out in the coming months before the program's officially rolled out April 1st. But that's kind of the spirit of it, that there are a lot of different contributions that are going to help come together and make this project work well. Another thing is operating costs, so especially related to supportive housing. I mean, that's something that is incredibly important, and it takes multiple levels of government and multiple participants in the social and even private sectors to come together and make that work. There are not, it's not a cost matching, that's right, and not necessarily a minimum contribution, but every partner should have something on the table for that initiative. And then more details to come in the new year on that.
Great, thank you. So j'en ai deux plus questions avant qu'on va aller aux des questions qui étaient posées aujourd'hui. Donc le deuxième, my second last question en français. Notre fonds finance les rénovations des coops et des OBNL encore sous convention de la SCHL. Quelle forme va prendre l'aide à la rénovation des immeubles existants que la stratégie mentionne?
Si on comprend bien la question, la forme pourrait être soit une contribution, soit un prêt à un taux d'intérêt favorable, ou soit une combinaison des deux, dépendant encore de la magnitude des réparations, des rénovations et de l'amélioration, les critères minimums à rencontrer. Donc, ça pourrait être une combinaison, soit un prêt, soit une contribution. Si on a bien compris la question.
Oui, et peut-être juste un peu d'un follow-up. Quand vous parlez des prêts favorables, et je vais parler ça en anglais, when you speak of favorable terms for a loan, do you see that as being essentially a lower than commercially available interest rate, or would there be other potential favorable terms related to the loans for renovation and expansion?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of considerations there. Definitely the interest rate would be favorable. CMHC obviously has government, we have access to government funding, and then we pass that rate on to the borrower, the ultimate borrower, which is quite favorable versus a market rate. And there could also be the terms could also be more favorable in terms of duration, in terms of loan to value, and so forth, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. So I have one last question that was provided in advance, and it's sort of an interesting take on the strategy. Has there been any discussion at the policy level about whether or how to best use employers as part of the solution on addressing the housing crisis? So, for example, talking about, for example, what employers might need in terms of government relief to support the objective of affordability in housing. For example, someone suggested relief from taxing benefits if an employer were to offer some kind of a housing subsidy. Has there been any sort of federal level discussion on looking at how employers could play a role?
So being honest, we haven't explored that in a lot of detail or even at all in the way it's phrased here, the way that you put it. But it's a very interesting idea. Actually, Jeff, it's not one that we saw through the consultation. So this is kind of a new and novel idea that's coming forward. And these kind of ideas need to keep coming because that's what's going to help us improve the strategy as we go along this journey.
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Dominica. And Dominica, can I ask, is there any English question that that members are asking?
Hi. Yes, we actually have a couple. So I'm going to start with the first one. And the first question is, does the 10-year extension for expiring federal projects include the urban Aboriginal programs?
Yes, definitely. So our objective is that the urban and Aboriginal stock is preserved and that affordability is maintained. So we want to see that stock, the condition where the condition is poor, improved, and we want to see affordability for the families who are living in those homes maintained.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, so some lines in the strategy publication imply that existing social housing tenants, maybe with market rent, will be prioritized for the portable housing benefit. Is this truly the case?
So I'm not sure what text that is referring to, but then the Canada Housing Benefit has not yet been designed. There's some very broad language in the vision document around what it may be. I think reflecting back on, I think the reference really is about we're looking to potentially expand the base of social housing or community-based housing, so new nonprofit housing, and that's where we would see potentially some prioritization, just given that there's alignment in terms of our social policy objective. But I guess to be clear on that one, the design work is not done, and that's going to be done in partnership with provinces and territories. So that question will be answered as we go through that process.
So I think, Dominique, I'm going to now, je vais demander une question posée en français, mais je crois que c'est une question intéressante et donc je vais dire en français, mais aussi en anglais. Est-ce que pourriez-vous donner un peu plus d'informations sur le centre de ressources techniques? Comment prévoyez-vous intégrer avec les ressources déjà en place de mouvements communautaires? Just to repeat that in English, Debbie and Michel, would you be able to provide a bit more information or detail about the Technical Resource Center that you referred to? And would this interact or intersect with existing similar resources already in place?
So I think I'll start in English and then let Michel translate and carry on. So I think if I understand the second part of the question about intersecting with the existing resources that are in place, the intention is really not that this replicate what's already out there, but we're really see that this being a tool that, or a center that will complement and support that. So it may very well point to existing resources that are already in place and be a little bit of an aggregator in that way. But where there are kind of particular challenges or particular areas that the center can support housing providers that are not really well addressed by the existing centers, that's really the space that the center is intended to operate in. The center is also really intended to support housing providers. If we think about the National Housing Strategy and the language that's been used in there, where we're talking about social sustainability, social inclusion, environmental performance, in addition to, in this space, there's quite a number of resources in terms of, financial health and well-being. Then there's lots of opportunity to provide additional support to align with those objectives of the National Housing Strategy in the space of environmental performance and social inclusion, etc.
Donc, juste pour tenter de répondre en français aussi. Donc, c'est un outil vraiment qui, comme Debbie a mentionné, pourrait aider les organisations à être dirigé vers des ressources qui existent déjà, mais c'est vraiment, l'intention, c'est vraiment d'avoir une valeur ajoutée. Et donc, c'est de peut-être aider les organismes à devenir plus résilients, de rencontrer plus les objectifs de la stratégie nationale. Donc, s'ils désirent être plus efficaces, que ce soit au niveau de l'énergie, que ce soit au niveau de leur gestion, que ce soit au niveau de l'accessibilité, tout ça, c'est de développer des ressources, leur capacité de se rendre, d'atteindre ces buts.
Okay, très bien, merci. I'll pass it back over to Dominica for a question in English.
Sure. So the next question is, it's about the 25% target for women and girls. And the question is, how will that target be implemented and tracked federally and in initiatives that are delivered by the provinces and territories?
Right. So for the National Housing Strategy, one of the things that we're, I think is a huge development and we're very pleased about is that there's going to be a very robust performance measurement framework and a lot of transparency on that. So that's so that your members and others like you can put ensure that the government, ensure accountability of the government to meeting the goals of the strategy. So the progress in terms of meeting that would be measured against an indicator that we're going to publish, and then there'll be regular reporting in terms of how we are doing. In terms of the provinces and territories, I mean, this is something we're in active discussions with provinces and territories on the National Housing Strategy, and so this is something that will have to be part of those discussions. It's an overall goal, an overall target, and it's not necessarily specific to any one initiative, but overall with all the investments, that is really the objective.
Thank you. Jeff, do you want to ask the French question now?
Sure. Donc, une autre question en français. Est-ce que les travaux de remise en état et de remise aux normes devront obligatoirement répondre à la fois à des exigences d'efficacité énergétique, d'accessibilité et d'abordabilité, ou un seul de ces éléments sera suffisant?
Yeah.
Oui, donc, si on comprend bien la question, je crois que le but de la stratégie nationale, c'est vraiment de toucher à tous ces éléments. Donc, encore là, c'est l'abordabilité, l'accessibilité et l'efficacité énergétique. Par contre, les critères seront probablement différents si c'est un édifice neuf qu'on veut construire, contrairement à un édifice qui serait réparé ou rénové. Donc, il y aurait et c'est peut-être là que les décisions au point de vue, est-ce que c'est un prêt, une contribution ou c'est une combinaison des deux, seront tenues en ligne de compte.
Juste pour ajouter, il va aussi avoir d'autres flexibilités, mais ça va être communiqué lors de le lancement de le programme en avril.
Thank you. Merci. Dominica, do you have another question in English?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So the next question is, how does the federally administered, the new Housing Co-Investment Fund differ from the existing IAH? And I think what they're saying is that what is going to be new in the administration portion differing from the IAH? Yeah,
so this is this program is actually quite different from the IH. The investment in affordable housing really was a federal investment that flowed to provinces and territories. Provinces and territories had flexibility to use it in a wide range of ways, to support their housing strategies or housing plans. Basically, the criteria under the IH was either it had to build affordable housing, repair affordable housing, provide affordability support, or address accessibility needs. This new co-investment fund is a federally delivered program, and it's direct federal investment in housing, and it's a defined program, or it will be a defined program when it's launched, and it'll come with terms and guidelines. The co-investment fund, distinct from the IH, what's really distinct is that this is an opportunity for the federal government to work with a wide range of partners and provide a range of tools, so loans or contributions, forgivable components of loans. We'll see what that looks like, but a lot of different tools, and to use them in different ways to make sure that you know, the project's affordable housing is being built on the ground. So the distinction primarily is that whereas the IH was you know, a federal investment in provincial priorities with broad parameters, this is really a federal program really designed to encourage the kind of housing that's been defined and exemplified in the vision document. So housing that is socially inclusive, that is well located in communities, that is environmentally efficient. So the kind of housing that the government Canada really thinks is going to support better life opportunities and support people in reaching their dreams and their aspirations.
Thank you. This question follows because it is back to the provinces, but the question is, how does CMHC have insight into how the provincial and territorial priorities will be established under the NHS?
Yeah, so with the in terms of the flexible funding, so the amount of funding that's going to provinces and territories that is really flexible, meaning that provinces and territories can use it in the broadest ways or to meet their own objectives, is $1.1 billion roughly over the 10-year period. We're in discussions with them around the entire suite of investments for the National Housing Strategy. The entire amount of money that's going to flow to provinces and territories is 7.7. So the flexible amount is a smaller element of that. In terms of how provinces and territories will determine its use, all funding of the National Housing Strategy does have to respect the principles of the National Housing Strategy, so that will be an expectation. And then provinces and territories will be developing plans that are intended to align with the overall vision of the National Housing Strategy and respect those principles. And those plans will be shared with the federal government. And I guess that's how we're going to see the priorities.
Yeah, and yeah, just to add to that, sorry, Jeff, just to add to that, as Debbie mentioned earlier, in terms of the Canada Housing Benefit, we will be working with them to develop, so there'll be federal principles, but they'll have an opportunity to make the program more suitable to their provincial needs also.
So, j'ai une autre question en anglais ici, another question in English, and it's with respect to the National Housing Co-Investment Fund. And our member has pointed out that within the strategy, under the term affordable under this program, it's stipulated that 30% of units must have rents at less than 80% of median market rents for a minimum of 20 years. And the question that's being asked is, why has the government not imposed a requirement that the current and any future social housing must remain social housing for low and modest income households without a time limit, and another requirement that the incomes for all households be actually less than 95% of median income, or something higher than what was listed?
So in terms of the co-investment fund, those are the minimum requirements, and this is it's an application-based process. It's a competitive process. So this is to say this is the floor. We're not going to support anything that doesn't meet that requirement. When we look at what that means in markets across the country, it does represent a level of affordability that is suitable for people with lower incomes in most communities. So that's a good threshold. In terms of the existing social housing, I guess the commitment really is that there's no net loss of existing social housing overall and within each province and territory. And there really is no talking to particular timelines. If I just go back to the co-investment fund, where the government is investing by providing a loan and a contribution, this is a significant improvement over what was in place or what is in place under the current program, the Investment in Affordable Housing, where the requirement, federal requirement, is only 10 years. But in terms of having affordability in perpetuity, it becomes difficult when what you're providing is has a finite value. So those types of things need to be reassessed as we go through through the strategy, you know, and see what the state of housing is when we get to the 10-year mark. But it seems like a very good starting point.
Thank you. Dominica, est-ce qu'il y a des autres questions en anglais? Other questions in English?
Yep, there are a couple more. So this one is might not really have an answer yet, but how quickly will or should we be expecting to see concrete results of the strategy? Shovels in the ground, new renovations, construction, etc. How quickly should the programs be producing results?
So difficult to say, obviously, specifically, but as we mentioned, the new programs are going to be launched April 1st, 2018. One of the things we have to keep in mind is the federal government provided significant investment in housing in Budget 216 also, which took us to 2018. So that was in the neighborhood of $4 billion of investments. And as Debbie alluded to earlier, we have two initiatives: the Rental Control Construction Initiative Fund and the Financing Initiative, sorry, and the Innovation Fund, which have been launched recently and are starting to show results. Look for announcements in the near future, additional announcements in the near future on projects across the country.
Thank you. The next question is about the 50% reduction goal in chronic homelessness. So in regards to that goal, over 10 years is what it's asking for. Why is this going to take so long? And the follow-up statement is that in many ways this is also an Indigenous issue due to the disproportionate number of Indigenous peoples on the street in this country, and Indigenous housing within the strategy is meant to be a priority.
Yeah, so on homelessness, as many of you would know, Parliamentary Secretary Adam Vaughan is leading an advisory panel to really look at the homelessness programming, and the intention is to introduce new preventative programming and new homelessness programming generally. So that's more details will come as that component of the strategy is elaborated upon and then communicated publicly. There is a strong focus on homelessness overall. So while there's a particular 50% target, many of the initiatives are going to be means of preventing homelessness. So think about the Canada Housing Benefit, which is about putting money into pockets of individuals and families who are struggling and who are at risk of homelessness. So we see that as really being a key preventative measure. As well, ensuring that we have a larger supply of really good affordable housing that integrates supports and services where it's needed, that is located in communities where people can access amenities, services, and supports is also a critical element of preventing homelessness. So we actually think the strategy is going to do a lot more for homelessness than may be evident in some of it. But look for more to come in the new year with regards to the new homelessness programming on that. And then with regards to Indigenous issues, I think it was more of a commentary, and I agree that Indigenous peoples are prioritized within the strategy and prioritized for access to the co-investment fund and the other tools and resources, and I'm sure will be prioritized within the homelessness, but we'll see when that comes out.
Thank you, Debbie. So the next question, this is a follow-up to the earlier question that Jeff posed regarding potential ways to use employers in the solution to the housing crisis and the type of non-financial regulatory help the government might explore, such as easing up on taxable benefit disincentives to take advantage of this force. So you said it was a novel idea that has not been considered or discussed yet, and to keep the ideas coming. So if one wanted to pursue this discussion further, where should one go to, given that consultations for the National Housing Strategy are now over?
So I'll take a stab at that one, and then Debbie. So certainly we're open to these suggestions, and while the consultations for the National Housing Strategy are over. I think there's a commitment both from CMHC and the federal government that what we started with the National Housing Strategy, the consultations we've held in the last couple of years, will now be ongoing. So we want to keep these conversations going. That's the reason we talked about a rigorous reporting framework and reporting to Parliament. We want to every couple of years take stock of what's happening, how is the strategy doing versus the outcomes we've set, and do we need to make adjustments? So this could potentially be, we'd have to explore it obviously, but this could certainly be something that we'd consider in the future.
Thanks, Michel. I have 2 more questions here online, and if anything else rolls in, I'll let you know. But so the next question is CMHC considering the impact of rent regulation on the portable housing benefit? For example, if there is little rent regulation and rents increase higher than the cost of living, the effectiveness of the portable housing benefit is reduced as the affordability gap increases.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, I mean, when I talked about the housing benefit, I talked about some of the complexity in ensuring that we get this right. Those are exactly the types of considerations that we're going to be looking at in partnership with provinces and territories. We obviously want this benefit to deliver maximum impact for individuals and families. That work with provinces and territories and seeing how it fits into their distinct systems and isn't going to just be replacing something that already exists or be clawed back or be eaten up by something else is really what is behind that co-development process.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, and certainly that's things we're going to consider, but we're also considering impacts on the rent itself, so to make sure that we don't, or the provinces and ourselves don't introduce something that would actually put pressure on rent and actually cause the reverse effect and make things less affordable in any regions of the country.
Thank you. I guess it's back to, Michel, you answered the question, but the person is just asking a follow-up as to the ongoing consultations. Is there someone that they should call, or which office, or is there going to be, you know, an email address or a consultation, accessible consultations for stakeholders? Yeah,
so there is currently the Place to Call Home website.
Okay.
And on that website, we will ensure that all the information with regards to consultations is published. In terms of what that looks like in the schedule, I mean, that has yet to be developed and posted, but that's a good place for information on that. And if I could just add on consultations, there's a couple of things that I could flag. One is that there will be consultations I mentioned in the presentation with regards to the legislation to support the right to housing, and that'll be in the first half of the new year, likely. So that's another opportunity to provide input in terms of the that element, which is a really important and foundational element of the strategy. As well, in terms of ongoing engagement, which itself is founded in that rights-based approach, we're going to be establishing a National Housing Council, and that council is going to have diverse representation from drawing from provinces and territories, municipalities, academics, think tanks, providers, and people with lived experience of housing need. And the role of that National Housing Council really is going to be providing us, CMHC, but importantly our minister as well, with advice in terms of the type of research that we should be digging in on. So, you know, exploring that question that was raised earlier, for example, as well as, you know, potential policy directions. So there's going to be an opportunity. It's really, the National Housing Strategy really is going to unfold in a very collaborative and open way and be guided by, as I said, this external council that's going to support our efforts.
Thank you, Debbie.
Une chose, c'est Jeff Morrison ici. Une chose que je veux juste mentionner concernant cette conseil et aussi la position de l'avocat, c'est qu'on va parler avec nos membres pour déterminer s'il y a des gens dans le secteur, des gens de leadership qui peut-être étaient intéressés d'être un membre en particulier de le conseil Je crois que c'était très important d'avoir des gens avec l'expérience dans le secteur de logement social qui étaient des membres de ce conseil. Donc, Debbie, comme vous avez dit, c'était définitivement un forum très important et on veut assurer qu'il y a des voix fortes de le secteur sur ce conseil.
Oui, et le processus, Jeff, va être un processus public, alors ça va être quelque chose assez transparent.
Okay, I have one more question on the side, and then I could pass it back to you, Jeff. Looks like the last question. So the final question is, and I think you've already answered this, but can ready-to-go projects, so eligible ready-to-go projects, immediately access funds from the National Housing Strategy?
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be actually great.
Okay.
As we said, well, our doors will be open April 1st, 2018, so say if somebody's got an application, by all means.
All right, those are all the questions that I've got, Jeff, so I'm passing it back to you.
Well, thank you, and I must say, Michel and Debbie, your answers were crisp and clear and to the point, and so as a result, we were able to get through all those questions. So thank you, and to do so a bit early, which I'm sure no one minds. Just a couple of very quick closing comments. First of all, from the point of view of CHRA, our work in partnership with the federal government and other stakeholders is certainly not over. There are a number of next steps for CHRA in particular. One, we will be continuing to lobby and advocate hard for the remaining pieces of the strategy which are not yet in place, and in particular the Indigenous component of that, and we've already reached out to INAC on that. As Michel and Debbie both mentioned, there will be continuing ongoing discussion and dialogue on the development of the pieces of the strategy, and we'll most certainly be at the table. And you know, as Michel stated up front, you know, we have an excellent relationship with CMHC, and so I know we look forward to those ongoing discussions. And then third, we will definitely be communicating to our members developments, updates as they happen. Clearly, we want our members to know what's going on, to know how to access these programs, ultimately to know how to work with and partner with the federal government in making sure that these programs are being felt and that the impact is being felt on the ground. So those are our commitments. Et je veux juste dire encore que nous sommes très heureux de travailler avec Michel, Debbie et vos équipes là, pour améliorer la stratégie et d'assurer que la stratégie bien reflète les intérêts des fournisseurs de logements partout au Canada. So with that, I just first of all want to say a thank you both to you, Michel and Debbie, for taking the time to present, to answer so many questions, but again, for all the work that both of you and your teams have put into this strategy over the many, many months that it's taken. Secondly, I want to say a thank you to everyone who's participated on this call for taking the time, but also for taking the time in the lead up to this to share your voices, to advocate, to lobby. We didn't get to this point by coincidence. This has taken a lot of time and work on the part of a lot of people. So I think this is a moment that we can all really celebrate and really take some credit for. And with that, I will remember to wish you all a very happy holiday, un joyeux Noël, un joyeux fête à vous tous. It's been an exciting year so far. We look forward to continuing to work with all of you. Next year is CHRA's 50th anniversary. It's going to be an exciting year. So we look forward to having you all as a part of it. So encore, Michel et Debbie, merci pour le temps. Thank you to you all, and have a great rest of the day and a great weekend. Merci encore.
Merci, Jeff. Thank you.